All right, growth and resources and development. And there it was. Hey, rapid population growth is a serious problem in many less developed countries. The population growth rate, which is the increase of a country's population in a year, including births, deaths, migrations, averages almost 2% in less developed countries. Many less developed countries are also experiencing an increase in life expectancy, and birth rates far outpace death. So high growth. This leads to rapid population growth, which means increased populations require more job opportunities, more health, more education, more industrial and agricultural production, exports and imports. The uneven distribution of natural resources throughout the world also affects development. Some nations lack mineral resources or farmland. LDCs often lack the physical and human capital necessary to develop resources. What's physical capital again? What is physical capital? Money. It can be money, but it's the things used to make something else, right? My pizza oven for my little food truck. What's human capital? Knowledge. The knowledge how to make the pizza, right? Without physical capital, industries can't grow and agricultural output will remain low. Yesterday we talked, what's the kind of agriculture where you're only growing enough to feed yourself or your family? Subsistence, yeah. Human capital, the skills and knowledge of workers is critical to economic development. Access to education is limited in LDCs. Anyone remember what LDCs stand for? Less developed countries. Good. Literacy rates are low, especially for girls. I'm not making that up. It's because girls have even less opportunity than boys in most less developed countries. When a country does not have sufficient human capital, it lacks skilled workers necessary to manage industries. Other problems are health and political issues. Many people in LDC suffer from malnutrition. Political factors have limited the development of many of these countries. They include a history of colonialism, which is like when Africa basically got divided up by European powers. So Europeans took control of most of Africa, never allowed them to develop. Central planning, civil war, corrupt or unstable governments. So how does a country move from a less developed country to a newly industrialized country? Yo. Yeah. How do we move? Well, internal financing, right? Internal financing, that's money people putting their money into banks, the banks giving out loans, right? But many citizens in less developed countries don't have any money to save, right? So it's hard to create economic opportunity when everybody doesn't have a lot of money. So how else can they do it? For that reason, most less developed countries finance development with foreign investment or external investment originating from other countries. So there's two types of foreign investment. First is a direct investment. That's the establishment of an enterprise by a foreigner. That could be like Nike setting up a factory, right? Because it's great for them because labor is going to be cheaper, costs are going to be cheaper, right? But much foreign direct investment comes from multinational corporations, right? Where they know it's going to be cheaper to sell or make their product in a less developed company or country. A foreign portfolio investment occurs when foreigners invest in a country's stock or bond market, often by purchasing shares in mutual funds. So there's investment tools that you can talk to your financial advisor about, saying, hey, I feel like the less developed countries in Asia are going to boom. Okay, so you can buy stocks and bonds from their stock markets. Foreign governments may give money to less developed countries for development or disaster relief. Foreign aid can be motivated by humanitarian concerns. At the same time, developed nations have military, political, economic, and cultural reasons to extend aid to less developed countries. So you hear stuff about the Middle East, right? Quite a bit in the news. And the Middle East is important to us because it's a big source of one of the resources we use a lot, oil. But there have been tons of humanitarian crises in Africa, and we don't hear a lot about them because we don't have a military, political, economic, cultural reason to care what's happening in Africa, right? But when you talk about stuff where places where either it's important for us militarily, then we're much more focused on it, or economically, mainly. Does that make sense? International economic institutions also promote development. So the World Bank is the largest provider of development assistance. They offer loan and advice and other resources. The UNDP is also dedicated to eliminate poverty through development, trying to get these countries developed economically. The IMF was originally created to stabilize exchange rates so that countries could trade with each other. It's expanded its role to promote development, to get countries more economically developed. The IMF offers advice and technical assistance that can help LDCs that are having trouble repaying debt to a nation that lent it money. So if a less developed country owes the United States a ton of money, and if they can't pay it back and they default, that would throw their country into more chaos, more turmoil. So sometimes the International Monetary Fund will come in and pay that or help pay that so that they can be more stable. Debt rescheduling is what's this called. Say I owe the United States a ton of money, I can't pay it all. The IMF will help me reschedule that debt. Instead of having to pay it off in 5 more years, I'll pay it off in 30 more years, a little bit at a time. That's rescheduling. A lot of people reschedule their debt here in the United States, either through what they call consolidation loans, where they pay off all their credit cards and they only have one payment, or they'll refinance their house if interest rates drop, or if they want to pull cash out for another investment opportunity. It's the same kind of thing, except on a much larger scale. In return for accepting help from the International Monetary Fund, a less developed country has to accept a stabilization program, and it'll pretty much have to do what the International Monetary Fund says economically, like where to focus your resources. Some private aid groups also work to help LDCs build their economies. NGOs are independent groups that raise money to fund aid and development programs. Red Cross, CARE, World Wildlife Fund are some examples. That's a long one. All right, finish up your Cornell notes. Study for your vocab check that we'll take right after lunch, and then we'll do the other. I need to post this.